It's an honor to have the Musial family with us to present the Lifetime Achievement Award, including Stan's daughters, Jerry, Janet, and Jean. We are grateful that they are here tonight. And now, the recipient of the 2024 Stan Musial Lifetime Achievement Award for Sportsmanship, Bob Costas.
So here we are.
We're going to now change positions. I'm going to interview you for a change.
I guess.
Yeah, so when you called me a couple of months ago, you said this one's important to me.
Yeah.
You've been honored by the Baseball Hall of Fame. And now this one means just as much to you as the Hall of Fame did.
Yeah, they're the two that are the most significant to me. They're both connected to baseball. This one's specifically connected to St. Louis and to one of the greatest players in the history of the game. And you know, it's such a cliche when people say he or she is as good a person as whatever it is that they're known for, but it's absolutely true in the case of Stan Musial. And as it happens, it's 50 years ago last month that I came to St. Louis and to KMOX to broadcast the games for the short-lived Spirits of St. Louis. And I thought at first when yes, you know what? If all you people had showed up at the games, they'd still be here.
They'd still be here, yeah.
But when they, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we were talking last night. You just said when you came to KMOX from Syracuse University.
Right.
How did you get that job? Because it's a fascinating story.
Well, my roommate for 1 year at Syracuse, a guy named Roger Holstein, had a job with the Spirits because his second cousin was the president of the team.
Right.
And so he calls me and says, they need an announcer. They haven't hired anybody yet. I said, Roger, they're not going to hire a 22-year-old kid. This is KMOX. This is Jack Buck. Joe Garagiola was there. Harry Carey. Come on. They're not going to hire me. Just send the tape, he says.
So what were you sending? What were you doing at
Well,
Syracuse?
I didn't have a basketball tape except for a game I'd done between Syracuse and Rutgers on the campus station when I was 20, and I listened to it. And then it wasn't so easy. You didn't have a link. It's reel-to-reel on a big woolen sack. And I found some parts that were okay, and I edited out all the parts that were choppy, and I removed any reference to the score so it would sound sequential if the score didn't match up. And then I had
Are you following this?
Yeah. Then I had an engineer re-record it with the bass up and the treble down to make me sound more authoritative and a little bit older, and I sent it off, and lo and behold, Jack Buck listened to it, he liked it, they brought me in for an interview, and they hired me, perhaps because they offered me $11,000 a year. And I said to Mr. Hyland, if I had 11 grand and I had to pay you, I would for the job, so I took it.
So that started here with the Spirits.
Yeah.
And that led to what's next? Because that's basketball.
Right.
Now, you're known for mostly baseball, you would say.
Yeah.
Right, that's your sweet spot. But you've also done football.
Yep.
And you've also done NBA.
Yep.
And you've wrapped the Olympics up for how many years?
A dozen Olympics.
A dozen Olympics. Did you ever think? Now we have a lot in common, actually. We have the same initials.
Yep.
And that's about it. No. And you grew up on Long Island.
Yep. So did you.
So did I.
Yeah.
And we're both 6'3", 220.
Correct.
Right. And we've loved this game, all
Absolutely.
the games. But baseball is the one. And why is it?
You know, in the late 50s, early 60s, when I first became aware of baseball, it was the unquestioned national pastime.
Right.
And it had a romance and mythology about it. There were games on TV, but the games were in black and white.
Right.
And most of the games were on the radio. And I wanted to be one of those voices in the night. I've told this story before. My dad was an inveterate gambler. And if he couldn't see the game, and if he still had a bet on it, he'd give me the keys to the car, 11, 12 years old, and I would turn it on enough to turn the dashboard light on, and then I would play with the dial, you know, calibrating it like a safecracker, trying to pick up WJR in Detroit and the Tigers, and KDK in Pittsburgh, and Bob Prince was doing the game for the Pirates. And on a really clear night, from like 900 miles away, I could get Harry Carey and Jack Buck on KMOX. And so even at that age, I was aware of who they were. And when I came to St. Louis for the interview, I really didn't think I was going to get the job. I thought it was just a shot in the dark. So I thought I'd better go to Stan Musial and Biggie's restaurant, because who would know if I'd ever set foot there again? So I had a hamburger and a Coke. Couldn't have been more than $10. I didn't have credit cards. I had no credit.
So now it's
right.
$83.
Could have been, right? So I left 3 singles, a quarter, a nickel, and a penny as the tip. And I'm sure the waiter was confused, but it was my homage to Musial's lifetime batting average of .331.
Right. You were a weird kid, Bob. I don't know how you would think about that.
You know, somehow it paid off.
But now, we shared a mutual, am I going to call it a love affair? But I have to, with Mickey Mantle.
Yes.
And we would exchange stories, baseball cards, and so on. And then we had evenings with Mickey that are beyond belief, that 2 guys growing up as we did in Long Island. Mickey was Elvis in pinstripes. I mean, for us, the 50s was about Mickey. I'm a few years older than you. When you get a chance to meet them, and you've met everybody, what's that like? Do you ever feel like I'm still that kid in Comac, and how did this all happen?
You know, the people that made an impression on you when you were a kid, that's always a greater thrill than someone who's closer to a contemporary, or now someone that I'm 20 or 30 years older than.
Right.
You still respect and appreciate and admire what they've done. But for me, you know, interviewing Wilt Chamberlain was a greater thrill than interviewing Larry Bird or Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan. Not that they weren't great, but they were my age,
right,
or a little bit younger. Interviewing Paul McCartney was an even bigger thrill than interviewing Bruce Springsteen. Not any slight toward Bruce, one of the greatest artists of all time, but Paul McCartney, I'm sitting on the floor in my parents' living room watching Ed Sullivan on black and white TV when I'm 11 years old, when they start the British invasion, and it's a national mania.
And you've done pretty much everything. Your talk show was fantastic. I was a guest many times on your show.
Yeah.
Then your HBO show. And now, at this point in your life, you look at this.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate, you know, to done well in our careers, and you have moments like this. But it's named for somebody you had great affection for.
Yes.
And indeed gave the eulogy at his funeral.
Yeah.
So tell everybody your feelings about Stan. And the greatest nickname of all time, because it rhymes. Because you can't do like Derek the Cleric. I mean, that's
Derek the Cleric, right?
Yeah. But he was the man to you.
He was the man. Obviously, you and I, because of where we grew up, we were Yankee fans, at least initially. But I have a great affinity now for the Cardinals. My children were born and raised in St. Louis. I spent most of my adult life here. So I always want the Cardinals to do well. I know my kids are rooting for the Cardinals. My daughter Taylor, who's here tonight, went through school from kindergarten all the way through high school graduation with one of his granddaughters, Lindsay, who did such a wonderful job narrating the opening video tonight about Stan. And I mentioned this story in my eulogy for Stan, which is 11 years ago now. All-Star game in the late 1950s. The National League had integrated to a greater extent and earlier than the American League, so they had more black and Hispanic players. And on this occasion, all the great black players on the National League squad, Frank Robinson, Ernie Banks, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, they're in a corner of the National League clubhouse playing cards. No white players anywhere near them. When Stan Musial just walked up, pulled up a folding chair, and said, "Deal me in." Now, Imagine what that meant, not only to those players, to the extent that decades later, Hank Aaron and Willie Mays each told me that story independently on separate occasions. But think what it meant to the other players, the white players in that clubhouse, some of them from the still Jim Crow South, to see the most accomplished and the most respected among them make that simple gesture, not a political gesture, a gesture of simple decency, which was the personification of who he was every day of his life.
Which makes, for me, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of all of you, that this award is in the right hands tonight. Because what you have done, on and off the screen is in the spirit of number 6. And I just can't think of anyone else who deserves this more than you. I'm thrilled that you asked me to be here tonight.
I'm thrilled that you are here.
And really, Bob, you know, God bless you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Thank you very much.
Bob Costas.
And thank you, St. Louis. I'm looking out. I see familiar faces. Thank you, St. Louis.